Well, I hope you're enjoying the Mexican food. I hope you're enjoying the Mexican food. We're going to go ahead and start the program. And let me introduce Bonnie Dunbar, who you all met certainly today. She was introduced a couple times. And I'll turn it over to Bonnie.
Thank you, George. Well, good evening. Right now I'm wearing my Texas A&M hat. And yeah, I heard the whoop whoop down there. Because we have two very distinguished speakers that will be speaking to us this evening from Texas A&M. The first one is actually my boss at Texas A&M, but also a part of the Aerospace Engineering Department. That's Dr. Dimitris Lagoudas. He's the Associate Vice Chancellor of Engineering Research, the Senior Associate Dean for Research, the Deputy Director of the Texas Engineering Experiment Station, and he serves as the Director of the Texas Institute for Intelligent Materials and Structures. In fact, he's written some of the seminal articles on shape memory alloys, if you're involved in that, and has brought in quite a bit of really outstanding research for the Texas A&M system. Dimitris was educated in Greece, has his mechanical engineering degree from Lehigh and his PhD in applied mathematics from Cornell, and has done postgraduate work at Max Planck Institute. His team on shape memory alloys is really well recognized in the country. He's co-authored about 400 scientific publications. And I won't go through all of his awards, but just say that his body of work has brought him to the leadership position of Texas A&M University, where he's also an editor of several prestigious journals. Accompanying him today is Dr. Victor Ugaz, who's a professor in chemical engineering and holder of the Charles D. Holland 53 professorship. He's also chair of the Texas A&M Professional Program in Biotechnology. He has a large number of interests, of course, in biomedical as well as chemical engineering, and a large number of honors. But he's going to come to us today to talk to us about a very novel program at Texas A&M called EnMed, the combination of engineering and medicine. I think that many of us are very supportive of, especially as we build humans into the design of new spaceflight systems, to talk about how we introduce engineering concepts into medical doctors. So with that, I would like to introduce Dr. Dimitris Lagoudas and bring him to the stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie, very much. Howdy. Howdy. It's a pleasure to be here with you tonight. We drove together with Victor, and I was telling him that this is one of the signature events where we interact and we dream about the future. Hopefully soon we'll be planning to go back to the moon and Mars, and we would like to be contributing from Texas A&M and our engineering programs and be part of this effort. I will say a few things about what new activities and programs we have in engineering, and then Victor will go in depth into the engineering medicine program, which hopefully will become one of our signature programs combining engineering and medicine. I just want to mention that A&M is one of the major systems in Texas with 11 universities, and we have 7 state agencies. So in engineering, you see on my left, Dr. Banks is the Vice Chancellor for Engineering and the Dean of the College of Engineering, but together we have the Texas Engineering Experiment Station that is responsible for the engineering research at Texas A&M, Transportation Institute, and the Extension Service that does most of the training, first responders and other training throughout the state of Texas. And these are the 11 universities. In College Station is the flagship university, but others are contributing: Prairie View, Kingsville, Texarkana. They're throughout the state of Texas. We're growing, the population of Texas is growing, and we're growing with it as the major land-grant university. 25 years ago, when we came to A&M, we were in the 40s. Now it is 66,000 students at Texas A&M. And if you go into the College of Engineering, actually the system as a whole has 120,000 students, and about half of them are at Texas A&M University. When you zoom into the College of Engineering, one of the 17 colleges at Texas A&M, you see that right now we're at 19,000 students. And many of them, 17,000, are in the main campus in College Station. But right now, 471, Mike Fossum is in charge of those at the Galveston campus, and he wants to double them very soon. We have about 500 in Qatar, where we have a strong engineering program, and also building throughout the engineering academies a program that is going outwards to the communities. We partnering with them, and then we prepare engineering students who will eventually go to the main campus. And also this year, actually, we started a new engineering program at McAllen in the south of Texas. You may have heard this 25 by 25. I think, Bonnie, probably you have talked about this. And it is our plan to grow to 25,000 students in about 7 or 8 years, by the year 2025. And when this happens, we expect, as I mentioned, the Galveston campus will double with Mike's leadership. And a couple of thousand students will be distance learning, but about 20,000 engineering students will be in the main campus at Texas A&M. In 14 departments we have established now. Ocean engineering, for example, is the latest one that is moving to Galveston campus, and one of the strongest departments and programs is aerospace engineering, with major investments especially in space programs. But you can graduate with 21 engineering majors from the College of Engineering at Texas A&M. And I want to mention that it is not just the pure engineering, but it is the engineering technology a main focus, with programs in the Department of Engineering, Technology and Industrial Distribution, especially, let's say, manufacturing is one of the major drivers for some of these programs. 600 faculty, and I want to mention several of them in prominent positions, members of the academy, but we have 65 professors of practice, which is something. When Dr. Banks came to A&M almost 5 years ago, we had 0 professors of practice. We had professors of instruction, research professors, but now we started recognizing that we need to bring individuals with experience from industry, from government labs, and now 65 of them dispersed in the different departments in the College of Engineering. We're proud to have 4 astronauts in our family, in the engineering family. Bonnie Dunbar, who is also the director, in addition to being a professor in the Department of Aerospace, she's also the director of the Institute for Engineering, Education and Innovation. We have Greg Chamitov, professor of practice, the Aero Department. Mike, who is the CEO of the Galveston campus. And the recent hire was Nancy Curry, who came in the Department of Industrial Engineering. She's another professor of practice there. So these are high-level individuals who have proven themselves in industry or government, the 65 and the ones I'm mentioning here, who come and they engage the students, they bring ideas, and they move us forward. They make engineering to be much more relevant. This is the institute that Bonnie is heading, in addition to establishing her own laboratory in the Department of Aerospace Engineering. But hopefully this will become a growing center where we have in the new renovated facilities, all of our engineering students will get together, discuss new methods for engineering education, hybrid distance learning, and also experiential learning. It is something that will be very promising, especially when we move into our new engineering education facilities. And in the aerospace department, for example, Greg Chamitov has established already a laboratory, and they have now virtual reality software that they have developed for habitats on Mars. Quite creative, working with tens of engineering students across many disciplines. This is the new engineering education center, all for students, that will be open during the summer. Next fall, the students will be there, and it is about 500,000 square feet, all for undergraduate engineering education. I would like to mention that a few activities that we're going through are through the state agencies. Just to mention that we have the academic programs, these 14 departments through the College of Engineering, but many of our research efforts come through the state agencies, as I mentioned. TIS, the experiment station, the Transportation Institute, and the training. And this gives us flexibility to establish agreements, to have relationships with other government agencies and execute, especially if there is not a degree granting opportunity. It is a research collaboration, fast track through our state agencies. And within TIS, which in addition to research focuses on workforce development and commercialization, we have organized our research priorities into 6 thematic areas. Energy, actually today we had a dialogue about the future of nuclear power. And the focus there is in developing nuclear reactors which are small, modular, and this could be a part of a space program. Healthcare, information systems, transportation, together with renewal in infrastructure is a key point. We're building facilities there. Materials and manufacturing, a big focus area, and national security and safety. I just mentioned a few highlights, a few programs, because Victor will talk about the engineering medicine. With NASA JSC, we have formed a Space Act agreement. We try to get the human exploration roadmap and then associate programs with that. And right now we have established 5 projects, and I think one of yours is in the making, where we have, through the Space Act agreement, our students and faculty, they can work on site at JSC and work embedded in the laboratories there. You can see wearable technologies, one of the projects, virtual reality, and there will be many more as we develop further collaborations through this Space Act agreement. This is one of the recent, NASA is going back, aeronautics, but also you can think of these re-entry vehicles in designing new aerial systems. And they recently established 5 university leadership institutes. We have one at Texas A&M on trying to use modern actuation technologies. Bonnie mentioned shape memory alloys. How can we use solid state actuators to morph a supersonic vehicle to reduce the sonic boom? And this is an almost impossible problem, but this is where one can use the latest materials, technologies, sensors that have been developed, and actuators, together with aerodynamics, and create something that is quite difficult. This is a very challenging problem, and we have assembled teams with partnering universities and industry. Boeing is a partner in this one to address this difficult problem. And in this spirit of grand challenges, as we move towards merging engineering and medicine, we just established an NSF ERC on sensor technologies connected with the human body for diagnostics in underserved populations in the south of Texas, in particular for this example, and then use data for diabetes, cardiovascular diseases, and this is a partnership that just been started with RISE as a member, UCLA and Florida International University. So these are some of the major projects we have been developing at Texas A&M with commercialization paths, with students being involved from freshman, sophomore years through programs we have like the Aggies Invent, Aggies Challenge programs, where we bring them together with mentors, give them some of these ideas and challenge them to come with innovations, with innovative solutions, and bring these innovations to practice through our the commercialization path we have developed through the state agencies. And I want to finish. These are some of the examples related to space, aeronautics, biomedical engineering, and ask Victor to tell you about the engineering medicine, this partnership that is focusing on some of the great challenges we have in medicine, and hopefully we'll find engineering solutions. And I hope some of those will be utilized for our path forward to go back to the moon and Mars. Victor?
Well, thank you for the opportunity to talk to you today. It's really an honor for me to be here to tell you a little bit about some of a particular initiative that we're very excited about. It's called the Engineering and Medicine Initiative, and it's aimed at training physicians that also have deep knowledge of engineering thinking. But sort of before I get into those details, it's useful to step back and examine some factors that are converging right now that sort of make this an ideal time for innovations at the interface between healthcare and engineering. And those kind of fall into domains of like cost, workforce, technology, and research. So in terms of costs, the driver that we're all familiar with is healthcare costs. So in 2014, personal healthcare costs were $3 trillion total. That's like $10,000 per person in the U.S. And so we all know, anybody that's been to the doctor, it's very expensive procedures like, heart valve replacement, over $50,000, or a bypass or a pacemaker. Those are $30,000, $40,000. And those costs are becoming a big problem for the economy as well as for individuals. In terms of the workforce, this is happening at the same time where there's actually a decrease in the number of physicians or healthcare workers that are available now. And the driver for this is the aging population, not just the patients getting older, but also the physicians getting older and retiring at a faster rate than new physicians coming into the pipeline. So some estimates say by 2025 will be a shortage of 100,000 physicians. And it's interesting, there's even some specialties like ophthalmology or urology where it's estimated that there should be fewer physicians practicing in some of those specialties in the future than there are currently. So these are kind of, paint kind of a dark picture, but at the same time, there's tremendous advancements in technology that are happening right now that are really transforming the way that healthcare is delivered and practiced. And a lot of these have implications for things like, long-term space flight and human factors as well. And this is just one that I wanted to highlight here. I'm showing two depictions of a surgical operating room. So on the top here, this is a picture from 1965. So this is an operating room where an open heart surgery procedure is being performed. And you may notice here on the left-hand side, this is actually a TV camera, like a large, TV studio camera. And what's happening here, actually, this is in Houston. Here in Houston, this is a procedure being performed by Dr. Michael DeBakey, and it's being transmitted by satellite to a medical team in Switzerland, in Geneva. and they're watching this procedure taking place live. So this is the first example of what we call telemedicine now, being able to engage at a remote site. But now we take for granted we can Skype or FaceTime with anyone. We have the technology to do that in our pockets right now. In the lower corner, what I wanted to draw your attention to was this is what's called a Da Vinci surgical robot. So this is a device that assists a physician to perform procedures. These have been used now for millions of minimally invasive surgical procedures. But what I want you to notice is that the patient is over here, but the physician is over here. He's in a different location. And so the physician using augmented reality and robotics, materials, electrical and computer engineering is able to use this instrument to transmit or translate their physical manipulations to precision manipulations performed by the robot. So technologies like this have a potential to transform healthcare in the sense that the physician could be here, the physician, he or she could be in the next room or in even another location, another city, and so this, then maybe you don't need to have a specialist physician in every town to do these procedures. And also there's tremendous interest in mobile type of scenarios like military scenarios, or as I think you've probably talked about today, space flight scenarios, long-term space flight. Maybe these kinds of technologies offer potential to deliver precision healthcare in a remote manner in a way that couldn't be done in the past. Other technologies like 3D printing, for example, are becoming more widely used. So, for example, many like infants have, in this example, as a rare heart condition. These are very difficult to treat because there's not a lot of opportunities for physicians to practice on these kinds of scenarios. So, what's being done now is with 3D printing technology. Physicians can make a model, a replica of this organ system and practice, get a chance to see how the procedure will be performed before they do it. So again, these kind of technologies offer opportunities for remote settings or where you may not have access to all the training for every possible scenario that could be envisioned. So this technology is another driving force that's occurring right now. The last one that I want to point out is in terms of research. And you could characterize this as maybe translating discoveries from the lab to a clinical or real-world setting. There's been a lot of research, for example, this is just one example, to study or identify biomarkers that could be targets for new therapeutics or new drug interventions. But it's been estimated that up to $30 billion is spent every year just trying to reproduce results that are in the scientific literature. So, you read a paper, somebody discovered some promising biomarker, and you try to reproduce it in your lab, and you can't do it. Maybe there's some trick that they did, you're not sure how to do it. But for this reason, there's hundreds of thousands of biomarkers that are discoveries are reported every year, but less than 1% of those actually lead to viable therapeutic leads. So this is a very inefficient process, and that reflects, trying to do research, I guess, in the lab without having engagement from a clinical stakeholder from a very early stage. So these kinds of issues sort of motivate, create a setting where it's recognized there needs to be some changes in the way that the physicians are trained to incorporate these kinds of technology-focused developments. And so the idea is to try to, us and many others are working on, is to try to, how do you augment the traditional fundamental basic science focused medical curriculum to incorporate engineering thinking so that then a physician can be trained to also use that problem solving toolbox and also be able to be at the forefront of innovations, technology innovations. So that's sort of the essence of this NMED initiative. So this is a dual MD and Masters of Engineering degree but it's a different kind of engineering degree. The students are different, so they already have bachelor's degree undergraduate training in engineering or computer science, so they come in with this engineering background. And the curriculum is integrated so that the engineering and medical training are unified. And so it's with the same 4-year commitment, then the student can satisfy the requirements for both of these degrees. So the idea is that these students would then be equipped to be at the leading edge of new technologies, adopting them, making them accessible, and innovating them during their time. And the other point is that, the curriculum is not just basic science-related curriculum. It's really heavily focused on innovation and entrepreneurship. So this initiative was announced about a little over a year ago, last summer, and so during that time, we've done a lot of work both on the curriculum side to try to figure out how we can deliver this kind of training to medical students, and also in terms of research to try to identify, what are some of the main areas of focus that are to keep our students at the frontiers of these developments. So in terms of the curriculum, again, the point is to offer, 2 credentials to the student. So how do we do that? Well, what we found out is that there's, different ways that engineers and physicians think about learning objectives or what the student competency should be. So this LCME, or the Liaison Committee for Medical Education, is the accrediting board for medical schools. So they have some, very specific guidelines about how physician training is structured and performed. So from their standpoint, the objective is that NMed students must demonstrate knowledge and practical application of engineering principles to patient care. And so there's some outcomes that have to be developed associated with that, and that those can be assessed as they're embedded into the curriculum. From the engineering side, we think of it a little bit differently. We think about outcomes as what are the skills that students will master while they're taking their coursework. And so some of the main things that we wanted to emphasize are developing innovations or advancements that help to carry human health forward, and also be able to understand how to take these innovations into a product environment. And that's very challenging in the medical area because it's a regulated environment. So you need to understand also regulatory, how you get these devices or interventions approved for clinical use. So having an understanding of those processes also is important, because many developments also fail because they're not able to be adopted for those reasons. But the vision, I guess, for the graduate of this program is that they will be able to, in addition to practice medicine, be innovators, developing some kind of innovation in the field, and also become thought leaders with respect to innovation as they progress through their careers. How do we embed this? So we're working with the colleagues in the College of Medicine to develop curriculum that integrates engineering with the medical concepts as they're taught at each stage through the curriculum process. And also embedded in that also is this opportunities for innovation, projects, and ability to develop and test ideas that are technology focused, so that the students have those experiences. And the idea is that this will be an integrated curriculum. So this sort of shows, what I want to point out is the purple box is here. This is the standard, 4-year medical curriculum, but these purple boxes represent sort of the percentage of the time that's sort of where the engineering content is woven in. So it's sort of a continuous thread throughout the basic science and the clerkships. And then there's a capstone kind of experience sort of in the 4th year that will tie all this together. With sort of that structure in place, then we sort of looked at how do you develop this way of instruction to deliver this skill set to the student. So we have a cohort of pilot students that are engaged right now in this initiative as we develop some of these processes, and this is as part of a standard MD Master's project where, so currently if someone wants to get an MD degree and a master's, they have to do the 4 years or do 3 years of the medical training, then take a year off, do the engineering master's, and then come back and complete their medical training. So it's disconnected. So that's what we want to avoid. But for this pilot phase, we're using this mechanism as a way to develop some of the curriculum. So one of them is, before they start, we have this what we call pre-matriculation course. So it's a 6-week kind of innovation boot camp where the students get, we have panels and field trips and other assignments related to, how you design, how you come up with need statements, develop innovation, develop solutions, and, see them through to product, through regulatory approval, things like that. And then, as Dimitri's pointed out in the previous, in his remarks, we have also a very active ecosystem for innovation at Texas A&M. So, for example, we have activities like this Aggies Invent. So these students participated in this over the summer. So one of the products or one of the solutions that they developed, their innovation actually was award-winning, was a device to capture retinal detachment or for retinal detachment in infants. Because current methods to do that, the instruments are very uncomfortable and difficult to use for both the doctor and the patient. So these are the kind of experiences that we want to provide for the students continuously as they progress through this program. So again, and so we're carrying that through a continuous thread as the students progress. Now, for the integrated model, maybe I can skip ahead. Just what does that look like? So, for example, what we're working for is a case-based instructional method. So instead of the, traditional instruction where it's, a conventional lecture-based mode of delivery of the content, this instructional method presents the concepts in the form of cases. So this is one that we worked out with our colleagues at the College of Medicine during the spring for our pilot. So this is a student with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, or COPD. So the scenario, this patient presents some symptoms. And so typically for the medical instruction, the student would use their knowledge as they study, for example, the respiratory system during this phase of the curriculum to both learn about that organ system and use that knowledge to come up with a diagnosis for this scenario. So what we've woven in then is a facilitated activity also that's integrated, but that's engineering focused. So, for example, the students can learn about the fundamentals of transport phenomena, oxygen, and transport through the respiratory system. They can look at the mechanics of the lung function, and they could look at diagnostic instruments that are used to make these diagnoses and determine, how those work or how they could be improved, what their limits are of sensitivity, things like that. So that's sort of the mechanism that we're developing to deliver this integrated instruction during the first 2 years of the curriculum. And then in the sort of so-called clerkship phase, where the medical students do their rotations through different specialty areas, then this is going to be based on sort of as the students, develop this knowledge and go through their sort of clinical rotations, they'll begin to identify, needs that could have technical solutions. And so then, as the students have learned through the program, they learn to develop need statements, establish the criteria of what those systems need to have to get the basic parameters for the design. And this is a sort of a general a systematic framework that's used to do this. So, for example, OB-GYN clerkship, so fertility testing, portable devices that can be used to assess, sperm count or sperm motility for at-home testing. This is actually an important diagnostic area. And so this creates a scenario, creates a need that the students then can use their experiences to develop solutions and actually, because they're already immersed in their clinical rotations, be able to get a better understanding of the parameters needed to design a system to address this need, as opposed to if they were just in a lab environment that was disconnected from the clinic. So that's the basic idea of integrating this engineering thinking into the curriculum. And then a final capstone experience will put all this together. So some of the challenges, are how do we map, because they're still getting an engineering degree, how do we map the credit hours or the units of time that are being spent on each of these topics to each degree. All those mechanics are I think, sort of breaking new ground in some ways administratively. So that's what we're working through now. So again, these students are, being admitted to medical school, so they have to follow the same criteria for admission to the College of Medicine, and then we have a secondary review of the students that indicate interest in EdMed for that program. And then when the integrated curriculum becomes established in fall of 2019, we're going to partner with the Houston Methodist Hospital here they have dedicated space in their pavilion facility. So they're working on now the instructional space. It's going to be state-of-the-art learning facilities, makerspace, those kinds of resources will be available to support this cohort. Okay, so that's sort of the need and the education. How do we try to deliver this kind of training? And then the last part is that I wanted to tell you about was some of the research initiatives. So as Dimitris pointed out, in talking with our colleagues at Houston Methodist, we identified actually a lot of areas in common, where common strengths and common opportunities that are sort of at the leading edge. And these are kind of just broad categories: advanced interventional technologies, regenerative engineering, imaging, analytics, and innovative therapeutics. And all these map to actually very well to needs that exist also in scenarios involving spaceflight or long-term spaceflight. So for example, we had some opportunities to collaborate, again, where we had like engineers and physicians in the same room, sort of really stimulating discussion to identify some of these areas. But regenerative engineering, 3D printing is becoming important to develop, for example, tissue scaffolds or therapeutic compounds. So those are technologies that can be also adaptable towards spaceflight, because then you can produce either therapeutic interventions or treatments on site with this kind of technology. Advanced interventional technology. So that goes with, again, the robotic surgery, robotic interventions, but also from the physician's point of view, they're interested in more like real-time analytics. So for example, as you're doing a procedure, you can get some information about, the mechanical properties, for example, of a patient's tissue, so that you can adjust your procedure to account for those subtle individual variations in real time. That's something that's very of a high degree of interest to the physicians. We found out that as we talked to them. And again, that's really at the core of engineering and technology, material science. Those are the things that we're working on already. So bringing those together, imaging, diagnostics, again, to be able to diagnose and get information from remote sites. You think about and this is where things like machine learning, artificial intelligence are going to become very important drivers. So, for example, like you go for some kind of a scan or an X-ray, and they're looking for either a tumor or some mass, and you ask them, how did you determine that? Or like, well, I've been doing this for 20 years, and I can tell that when I see something like this, that's something, an area of concern. But there's enormous potential for these kinds of analysis to be, automated using some of these new analytical technologies. And so, again, these are mapping to areas of high priority in terms of research in general, as expressed by NIH, National Academy of Engineering grand challenges, and even potentially disruptive technologies in the healthcare field: artificial intelligence, augmented reality, robotics, 3D printing. Those are all things that really, again, are very technology and engineering focused. So the more we can do to be able to equip physicians to not only be able to use these technologies, but also understand them at a more fundamental level so that they can be involved in their innovation is very important. Also, as Demetrius pointed out, this maps to other initiatives sort of at Texas A&M as well, the Paths Up initiative for remote healthcare, and also we're affiliated with partners in some nationwide manufacturing initiatives for biomaterials and therapeutic manufacturing as well. So these are all areas of great interest at multiple levels currently. So that kind of, I guess, hope to, in this time, sort of give you an idea what the motivation, what the drivers were for this initiative, how we're thinking about developing the training, and how we're thinking about combining or integrating the research focus, and how those could potentially be, opportunities to address problems that you've identified with regard to spaceflight. So again, this is kind of it's a very exciting time for change in the medical field. Technology is really going to transform the way medicine is practiced in the next decade. So that's kind of what we're trying to equip these practitioners of the future to be at the forefront of those changes. So with that, I guess I want to thanks again for, my undergrad training was in aerospace engineering, actually, so, space flight, something I've always been very deeply interested in. And I wanted to acknowledge also the Houston Astros for, a very inspiring World Series. So thanks.